Aidan remembered it all too vividly. The endless sweep of constellations, the hushed breath of galaxies turning, the silver rivers of starlight that answered to his call. He had been a guardian of the stars, a keeper of their fire, tasked with ensuring that their light fell where it was most needed. Every flicker in the heavens had been his to guide, and every wish whispered beneath the firmament had once reached his ears. But that was before the fall. Now he stood in the middle of a rain-slick street in Seoul, invisible to human eyes, watching the neon lights bleed into puddles. 1,000 years had passed since his exile, yet the memory of that first descent still clawed at him, the sky cracking open like glass, the voices of his kind condemning him for defying their law, the rush of fire as he plummeted into the mortal world. They called it justice. He called it loneliness. His punishment was cruelly elegant. To remain among mortals, he was stripped of eternity's warmth, forced to bargain with fleeting human lives. Wishes came to him like moths drawn to a flame, desperate whispers from those who had nothing left to lose. He granted them, yes, but every miracle came at a cost. In exchange for their desires, he claimed fragments of their years, their health, their laughter. It kept him alive, but it left him emptier with each passing century. Aidan leaned against the shadowed corner of a cafe, watching a young couple inside. The boy reached across the table, brushing crumbs from the girl's lips, and she laughed, her smile spilling light into the dim evening. It was such a small, human thing, ordinary and fragile, yet it struck him harder than any curse. He turned away. Love was something he could never afford to touch, not anymore. He told himself that over and over, a mantra against the ache. But sometimes, in the quietest hours of night, when the world slept and the stars above seemed just beyond reach, he remembered. He remembered what it felt like to care so deeply for one fragile soul that he had broken the very laws of heaven for her. And he remembered how it ended, with her fading into dust while he remained, eternal, cursed, alone. The scent of rain clung to him as he walked, his boots scattering droplets across the pavement. Mortals brushed past, unaware of the being that moved among them. Their wishes hummed faintly, tugging at the edges of his senses. A girl wished for her mother's recovery. A man wished for wealth. A child wished for her father to come home. He could give them what they wanted, with a touch, a word, a promise. But always there would be a price, always the thread of their life unraveling just a little sooner. Once he had been merciful. Once he had tried to spare them. But mercy, he had learned, only bred weakness. Now he bargained coldly. It was survival, nothing more. Yet tonight felt different. He paused on a bridge, gazing at the Han River stretching dark and endless below. The city lights blurred on the water's surface, shimmering like fragments of broken stars. His reflection looked back at him, too perfect, too unchanging, cursed with a beauty that never faded. The face of a man, but the eyes of something that had seen too much. "You should not look at me like that," he murmured to his own reflection, voice bitter. "You are no longer a star." And yet a whisper tugged at him, faint as starlight. Not yet, not completely. He shook his head, dismissing it, but when he looked up, he saw her. A girl on the opposite side of the bridge, alone, holding an umbrella through the rain had already stopped. She wasn't remarkable at first glance, dark hair tumbling around her shoulders, her coat buttoned neatly against the cold. But something about her stilled him. She leaned on the railing, staring into the river as if searching for answers only the current could give. Aidan's breath caught. It wasn't her beauty, though she had it in quiet measure. It was the loneliness etched in the curve of her shoulders, the unspoken weight in her eyes. He knew that look. He had worn his himself for centuries. The curse inside him stirred. He could sense her wish. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, reaching towards him. She wished for strength, not wealth, not love, not revenge, simply strength, to endure, to keep standing when the world tried to break her. It was such a fragile, human wish, and for the first time in centuries he did not feel the hunger to claim it. He only felt curious. Who was she, this mortal who asked for nothing more than the courage to carry her own pain? The umbrella tilted slightly, and the girl's gaze lifted. For one breathless second, Aidan wondered if she could see him, truly see him. The thought was absurd. Mortals could not perceive him unless he chose to reveal himself. But her eyes lingered where he stood, and something deep inside him trembled. He turned away too quickly, vanishing into the night before he could unravel. He should not have looked. He should not have cared. But even as he walked, her image burned against his thoughts. The curve of her lips, the quiet defiance in her stance, and the whispered wish that had brushed against his soul like a fragile feather. He told himself it meant nothing. She was just another mortal, fleeting as smoke. But deep inside, in the part of him that still remembered what it felt like to love, a star flickered. A dangerous star. Aidan clenched his fists, reminding himself of the curse. He was not meant for love. He was not meant for hope. He was only meant to wander, to bargain, to survive. And yet that night, as he disappeared into the shadows of the city, he carried with him a feeling he had not allowed himself for 1,000 years. A sense that perhaps, just perhaps, his fall was not the end. Perhaps it was the beginning. The funeral had been crowded, but Serena had never felt more alone. Rows of black suits lined the hall, faces dipped in rehearsed sorrow. White lilies filled the air with their faint perfume, masking the rot of hypocrisy. They bowed to her, murmured condolences, but their eyes told another story. Calculating, measuring, waiting. She stood rigid, her hands clasped tightly, nails pressing into her palms. She would not cry here, not in front of them. Because among the mourners were wolves. Executives of the family conglomerate, distant relatives with smiles too sharp, rivals who had once bowed to her father but now whispered in corners. They were waiting for her to falter, for the orphaned daughter to collapse under the weight of grief. She would not give them that satisfaction. When the ceremony ended, Serena walked out into the cold air, her heels sharp against the pavement. Cameras flashed, reporters shouting questions she ignored. Her driver opened the car door, but before stepping inside, she glanced once more at the sky. Dark clouds pressed low, heavy with unshed rain. "Are you watching, Father, Mother?" she thought, her throat tightening. "Do you see what they have left me with?" Inside the car, she finally allowed her mask to slip, just for a moment. Her hand trembled against her lap, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. She had inherited not just an empire, but a battlefield. At 24, she was now the head of the Doe group, a young woman, unwed, surrounded by men twice her age who thought power was their birthright. They would try to manipulate her, undermine her, break her, and if that failed, they would try to destroy her entirely. But they had underestimated her. Serena had grown up in boardrooms as much as in classrooms. Her father had taught her the language of contracts before fairy tales, her mother the art of survival before affection. They had not raised her to be soft. They had raised her to endure, and she would.
The next morning, she walked into the Dew Group headquarters dressed in black silk, her hair pulled into a sharp knot. The boardroom was filled with men who rose reluctantly at her entrance. Their eyes flicked to one another, silently questioning, would she stumble? She did not. "From today," she said, her voice steady, "I will oversee every division of this company. Any attempt to undermine my authority will be dealt with as an act of treason against the Dew Group itself." Some scoffed. Others shifted uneasily. One man smiled too broadly, promising loyalty she knew he did not mean, but none could deny the steel in her tone. Still, when she left the boardroom, her legs ached with the effort of standing tall. In the solitude of her office, she allowed herself a deep breath, steadying the storm inside her. She gazed out at the city skyline, endless towers of glass and steel, glittering beneath the fading sun. Somewhere out there, hidden in the crowd, was the truth about her parents' deaths. She could feel it, like a thread tugging at the edges of her soul, and she swore she would find it. But nights were the hardest. When the meetings ended and the lights of the city dimmed, when her phone finally stopped buzzing with demands, she returned to her penthouse, empty, echoing, silent. The marble floors and glass walls gleamed, but no warmth lingered. The housekeepers had been dismissed early. She preferred it that way. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the window looking down at the endless river of headlights. Soul pulsed beneath her like a living thing, restless, relentless. Somewhere in that vast crowd there were allies, enemies, and strangers who cared nothing for her name, and yet she had never felt more distant from them all. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. Her own eyes looked unfamiliar, sharper, harder. Loneliness whispered at her edges, but she crushed it down. She could not afford weakness. Trust no one. That was the rule. Every smile could hide a knife. Every hand extended could be waiting to push her into the abyss. She had seen it in the boardroom already, the subtle glances, the whispered plots. And she had seen it at the funeral, in the way her so-called relatives had eyed her like vultures circling a carcass. She lifted the glass, the wine bitter on her tongue. "You wanted me strong, didn't you?" she whispered to the silent apartment. "Well, I will be, even if it kills me." The city outside roared with life, but her world was silent. Until the dream came. That night, she dreamed of light. A field of stars stretched endlessly, and in the center, a figure stood with his back to her, tall, dark, radiant with a glow that was not human. She called out, but he did not turn. Still, she felt it, the strange pull, as if the distance between them was only an illusion. When she woke, her chest ached with a longing she could not name. She brushed it off. It was just a dream. Just her mind reaching for comfort in a world that offered none. But still, when she walked into the office the next morning, a strange sense of expectancy clung to her, as if the air itself was waiting. Serena shook it off, straightened her spine, and walked forward. The heiress of shadows had no time for dreams, not knowing that soon the shadows would lead her to the very star who had fallen from the heavens. The night of their meeting began like any other for Serena. Sharp, calculated, and solitary. The gala was held at a luxury hotel downtown. Chandeliers scattering light across glass walls, champagne flowing in crystal flutes. She wore black silk threaded with silver, a dress her mother would have chosen for her, elegant, untouchable. Around her, the city's elite buzzed with laughter, their smiles polished but shallow. To them, she was no longer a grieving daughter. She was the young chairwoman of the Do Group, the heiress whose every movement was measured and dissected, a prize, a threat, a target. She smiled when required, raised her glass when expected, but her heart was elsewhere. The walls felt too close, the conversations too sharp. She excused herself, heels clicking across marble floors, and slipped out to the terrace. Cool night air wrapped around her. Below, the city stretched endlessly, towers of glass shimmering like constellations. For a moment she let herself breathe. She didn't know that danger was already moving toward her. Across the street, a black van idled, its tinted windows hiding the men inside. Hired hands, faceless and forgettable, their orders simple: frighten the heiress, weaken her guard, make her pliable. But fear was a weapon that often spilled too far. Inside the hotel, smoke began to curl from the lower floor, a fire set deliberately, masked as a faulty wire. The alarm shrieked. Panic rippled through the gala as guests scattered, their gowns and tuxedos flashing in the chaos. Serena froze for a single heartbeat before instinct sharpened her. She turned to re-enter, only to see the flames licking higher, trapping her path. The terrace became a cage. She coughed against the smoke, her chest tightening. Somewhere below, she heard glass shatter, men's voices cutting through the noise. She understood then. This was no accident. This was an attack. Her pulse thundered. She stepped back, gripping the railing, her mind racing. She could fight in boardrooms, but here, against fire, against faceless predators, her weapons were useless. And then he appeared. Aiden moved through the smoke like shadow and flame, his long coat billowing though no wind stirred. His presence was impossible to ignore. Sharp lines, dark eyes that glowed faintly with something unearthly, a beauty too precise to be human. He should not have intervened. For centuries he had remained apart, untouched by mortal struggles. But the moment he felt her fear rippled through the city, it pulled him like a tide. He hadn't understood why, only that he could not turn away. Now, as he stood before her, Serena's eyes widened. For one dizzying moment, she thought she was hallucinating, a figure too unreal to exist amid fire and smoke. "Who?" she began, but her words broke into a cough. "Stay behind me," Aiden said, his voice deep, commanding, strangely gentle beneath the steel. Before she could question, the men burst onto the terrace, faces masked, weapons glinting. One lunged forward. Aiden lifted a hand. The man crumpled before he could reach her, his weapon clattering to the ground. Another rushed in, but with a glance, Aiden sent him sprawling. It was not human strength. It was something older, darker, touched with starlight. Serena stumbled back, her mind reeling. "Who are you? What are you?" But the fire surged, the heat curling against her skin. Smoke clawed at her lungs, and suddenly her foot slipped on the slick stone of the terrace. She gasped as her balance tipped backward, over the railing, over the dizzying drop to the street below. A hand caught her hand, strong, unyielding, pulling her back into the safety of his chest. For a heartbeat, her face pressed against him, the scent of rain and smoke and something colder like midnight. Her pulse hammered wildly. Their eyes met. In that instant, the world seemed to still. The fire roared, the men groaned on the ground, but none of it mattered. His gaze locked onto hers, and something inside her chest shifted, like a thread tightening, pulling her closer. And in him, something shattered. The curse that had bound him for centuries stirred violently. He felt it before he saw it, the mark on his wrist burning, searing, unraveling. Light flared, not from him, but from her. Aiden's breath caught. No, this wasn't possible. The celestial mark, his tether to power, to survival, leapt from his skin to hers, embedding itself against the pale curve of her collarbone, a symbol of stars and flame, glowing briefly before fading beneath her skin. He staggered, the strength draining from his body in an instant. The world tilted, his powers, his eternity, gone, ripped away, bound to her. Serena gasped, clutching at her chest, her body trembling as the foreign energy pulsed through her veins. She looked at him in shock, fear mingling with something unspoken. "What did you do to me?" she whispered. Aiden forced himself upright, though weakness clawed at him. His jaw clenched. "Not me," he said hoarsely. "Fate." The fire alarms wailed louder, sirens rising outside. The attackers fled into the smoke, leaving the terrace a chaos of heat and ruin. Serena swayed, her knees threatening to buckle. Instinctively, Aiden steadied her, though his own strength faltered. "Who are you?" she asked him, her voice trembling. His eyes lingered on her, too long, too soft for what he meant to say. "No one you should know." But she held his gaze, unyielding even in fear. "You saved me." Something in his chest twisted. He had saved countless humans before.
The fire crew stormed the building then, pulling guests to safety. Red lights flared against the night. In the confusion, Aiden slipped them away, guiding her through back corridors until they reached the quiet of the alley. Only then did he release her hand. The absence of his touch left her colder than the night air. Serena stood tall despite the ash on her dress, her eyes sharp on him. "I don't know what just happened," she said, "but I will find out. And you—" She hesitated, her voice softening just slightly. "Owe me an explanation." Aiden almost laughed. He who owed nothing to mortals, bound now to the one woman who demanded everything with just her gaze. He inclined his head, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Careful what you wish for, Serena." Her breath hitched at the sound of her name, though she had never given it. And in that moment, though neither spoke it, both knew their fates had been sealed. Not by choice, not by chance, but by a mark written in the stars themselves. Serena had always hated silence. In silence, her thoughts grew sharp, voices of doubt whispering too loudly. But now, as she sat in her penthouse opposite the stranger who had pulled her from fire and darkness, silence was unbearable. Aiden sat across from her, his posture relaxed, as if the chaos of the night had not stripped him of everything. His dark coat draped carelessly over the chair, his eyes unreadable. He looked human enough, except no human radiated that strange air, that quiet command of space. She wanted answers, but more than that, she wanted control. "You're going to explain," she said finally, her voice low but edged with steel. Aiden tilted his head, lips curving faintly. "Explain what?" Serena's eyes narrowed. "Don't play with me. That mark, the fire, the men, none of it was coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence." His gaze lingered on her collarbone, where the celestial mark now lay hidden beneath silk. He could feel it, pulsing faintly, binding them. His power, his eternity, now resided within her, and she had no idea what it meant. "You wouldn't believe me," he said softly. "Try me." The air stretched between them. Aiden studied her, the defiance in her eyes, the line of her jaw that refused to yield. so much like the mortals he had once dismissed as fragile. But she was not fragile. She was fire wrapped in ice. Finally, he said, "I'm not what you think I am. I'm not human. And that mark on you, it belonged to me." Serena's laugh was sharp, though it carried no humor. "Not human? What then? An angel? A demon?" His lips curved, but not with amusement. Something in between. She faltered, just slightly. The weight in his eyes told her he wasn't lying. Against reason, against logic, a sliver of belief slipped through. She had felt it, after all, the surge of power when the mark branded her, the heat that was not her own. Her voice softened, though suspicion lingered. "And now?" "Now," Aiden said, his tone grim, "I am nothing without you. My survival depends on staying near you." Serena's heartbeat quickened. Dependence was dangerous. Attachments even more so. And yet his words didn't sound like a plea. They sounded like a verdict. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "So you're saying you're stuck with me?" Aiden smirked, returned, faint but undeniable. "It seems so." The thought unsettled her, more than the fire, more than the attack. A stranger bound to her life, a being she couldn't understand, whose presence unsettled her very breath. And yet, she wasn't as afraid as she should have been. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A message from her secretary. Rumors spreading, investors restless, relatives circling. Her jaw tightened. Of course, the attack hadn't been enough. They wanted to bleed her reputation dry too. In the cutthroat world of conglomerates, weakness was death. And a young, unmarried heiress with enemies was easy prey. She looked at Aiden then, truly looked. Tall, unshaken, dangerous in ways no one could define. A thought sparked in her mind, reckless, absurd, but growing louder with every heartbeat. If her enemies wanted to corner her, she would flip the board. "I have a proposal," she said. Aiden arched his head. "You're hardly in a position to bargain." "Don't underestimate me." She straightened, her voice smooth as glass. "You say you need to stay close to me to survive. Fine, then stay. But we'll make it official, public, untouchable." He studied her, eyes narrowing. "What are you suggesting?" She met his gaze head-on. "A fake engagement." The words dropped like stones into water. For a long moment there was silence. Then Aiden laughed, low, rich, unexpectedly. "You want me to play your fiancé?" he said, amusement threading his tone. Serena did not flinch. "My relatives are already circling, eager to tear me apart. The board doubts me, the press wants a scandal. If they think I've allied myself with someone powerful, someone who won't be swayed, it will silence them, at least for now." "And what do I gain?" His voice was curious, but his eyes gleamed with something unreadable. "You gain proximity," she said coolly. "Exactly what you need." He leaned back, considering. It was absurd, ridiculous, dangerous, and yet he found himself intrigued. The fire in her eyes, the audacity of her plan, it stirred something inside him he thought long dead. "A marriage built on lies," he mused. "How very human." Her lips curved, faintly mocking. "Better than survival built on stealing lives." His gaze sharpened. For once,
She had struck a nerve. But instead of anger, a slow smile spread across his face. "You're braver than you should be. I don't have the luxury of fear." The air thickened between them, charged with something neither wanted to name. Finally, Aiden extended his hand, long fingers steady. Serena hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. His touch was cool, steady, yet it sent a ripple through her veins. As their hands clasped, the faint glow of the mark shimmered briefly beneath her skin, binding them in a way neither contract nor vow could capture. When she finally withdrew, her mask slipped back into place. "Then it's decided. Tomorrow we announce it." Aiden rose, his presence filling the room. "Be careful, Serena. Once you play this game, there's no undoing it." She met his gaze head-on, her eyes unwavering. "I was born into games like this." But when he left her apartment that night, silence returned heavier than before. Serena pressed her fingers against the place where the mark pulsed faintly, her chest tight with questions she couldn't ask. And Aiden, walking into the shadows, found himself unsettled for the first time in centuries. The mark had bound him to survive near her, but survival was no longer the only reason he wanted to stay. The news of their sudden engagement spread like wildfire. By morning, headlines screamed across Seoul. Harris Doe engaged to mysterious businessman. Photographs of them leaving her penthouse together were plastered on every screen. His arm draped casually around her shoulders, her chin held high, daring anyone to question. The board was silenced, relatives hushed, investors reassured. On the surface, it was the perfect strategy. But beneath the glittering facade, darker eyes were watching. For centuries, Aiden had lived knowing he was hunted.
Cosmic hunters, shadows birthed from the very law he had defied, roamed the earth in silence, their only purpose, to find the fallen and erase them, returning their stolen fragments of eternity to the void. He had evaded them for centuries, always hidden, always stronger. But now, stripped of his power, he was vulnerable. And worse, the mark was no longer on him. It was on Serena. She had become their beacon. The first attack came swiftly. 3 nights after their announcement, Serena left her office late. The lobby was quiet, the security staff already dismissed at her request. She preferred solitude. But as she crossed the marble floor, the air shifted, cold, unnatural. The glass doors reflected more than her silhouette. Behind her, a figure emerged from the shadows. Its form was vaguely human, but its eyes glowed with a pale silver, empty as the void. Another slipped from the corner, then another, their movements unnaturally fluid. Serena's breath hitched. Something primal in her blood screamed danger. The nearest one reached for her, its hand stretching unnaturally long, fingers like knives. She stumbled back, her phone clattering to the floor. And then, Aiden was there. He moved between her and the hunters, his arm sweeping her behind him. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice sharp, the edge of command cutting through the air. The hunters hissed, their silver eyes fixing on him. One lunged. Aiden caught its arm, twisting, his strength faltering, but still sharp enough to send it crashing into the wall. But another clawed at his side, and pain tore through him. For the first time in centuries, he bled. Serena's eyes widened as she saw crimson bloom against his shirt. He gritted his teeth, shoving the creature back, but his movements were slower, his breath harsher. Without the mark, he was weakened. The hunters knew it. They circled, closing in. Serena, her heart hammering, grabbed the nearest object, a decorative vase, and hurled it with all her strength. It shattered against one of the hunters, barely slowing it, but enough to catch its attention. "Run!" Aiden snarled at her.
But she did not move. Instead, she pressed herself closer behind him, defiance in her eyes. "I won't leave you." Something inside him clenched at her words. Foolish, reckless human. Yet her refusal struck deeper than any blade. The hunters lunged again. Aiden caught one, forcing it down, his knuckles white. But as another clawed to strike Serena, a sudden glow burst across her skin. The mark. It flared brilliantly, wrapping her in a shield of light. The hunter recoiled, shrieking, its form dissolving into smoke. The others faltered, their movements stuttering, their eyes flickering with fear. Serena trembled, clutching her chest where the mark still glowed faintly. Her knees threatened to give, but Aiden caught her, his grip steady despite his own wound. Her eyes lifted to his. What were those things? His jaw tightened. Hunters. She swallowed hard. And they were after me? No, he corrected, his gaze dark. They were after me. But now, they'll come for you too. The weight of it settled heavily. Serena had been raised to battle rivals, scheming relatives, boardroom politics. But this, monsters born of the cosmos itself, was beyond anything she had imagined. And yet, as fear threatened to claw at her, she found herself looking not at the blood on his shirt, not at the shadows that lingered, but at his face. The way his jaw clenched in restraint, the way his eyes softened for a brief second when they met hers. "You protected me," she said quietly. Aiden looked away, his voice low. "I swore long ago I would never protect another human. But with you," he trailed off, shaking his head, "it's not a choice." Her heart skipped, though she quickly masked it. "You can't keep bleeding for me. You said your survival depends on me. Doesn't mine now depend on you?" The truth of it was undeniable. For a moment, the world outside fell silent. Just the two of them, bound by a mark neither asked for, standing on a battlefield neither wanted. Finally, Aiden straightened, his hand lingering briefly against her arm. "From now on, you don't leave my sight. Not at night, not in the day. Do you understand?" Serena arched her brow despite the tremor in her chest. "Are you giving me orders?" "I'm keeping you alive," he said simply. Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes were serious. "Then I suppose we're allies now. Not just on paper, not just in the press. For real." His gaze lingered on her, something unspoken flickering in the dark depths. He gave the smallest of nods. For centuries, he had wandered alone, untouchable, unbreakable. Now weakened, hunted, and bound to a woman that defied fear itself, Aiden realized something terrifying. He had more to lose than ever before. And as Serena stood by his side, her chin lifted in defiance against a universe she couldn't see, he made a vow, not to the stars, not to the heavens, but to her. No hunter, no curse, no fate would take her. Not while he still drew breath. Living with Aiden was like living with a storm. Serena discovered this within a week of their engagement. He moved into her penthouse without asking, claiming her safety required it. He changed her security system, rewrote her schedules, and dismissed half her staff, all without consulting her. "You don't get to run my life," she snapped one morning, watching him scroll through her calendar as if it belonged to him. Aiden glanced up, unbothered. "If you want to stay alive, I do." Serena slammed her coffee cup down harder than necessary. "You're insufferable." "And you're reckless," he countered, his voice infuriatingly calm. Their arguments became a rhythm, sharp and frequent. She accused him of arrogance. He accused her of pride. Yet underneath the clash of words, an invisible thread tugged them closer. Because for every fight, there came a moment that softened the edges. Like the night Serena woke from a nightmare, breathless and trembling. She found Aiden already in the doorway, drawn by the faint glow of the mark. He didn't ask what she dreamed. He simply set a glass of water by her bed and sat silently nearby until her breathing steadied. Or the morning, she burned her hand cooking eggs, an embarrassing attempt to prove she wasn't helpless. Aiden caught her wrist before she could protest, his cool fingers brushing against the reddened skin. For a second, the air shifted, his usual sarcasm replaced with something gentler, almost tender. "You don't have to do everything alone," he murmured. Serena pulled away quickly, hiding the sudden flutter in her chest. "I've always done everything alone." His gaze lingered, quiet, unreadable. Not anymore. Their banter began to change. "What are you doing?" she asked one evening when she caught him adjusting the books on her shelf. "I'm fixing your chaos," he said, aligning the spines with impossible precision. "It's called personality. It's called disorder." She rolled her eyes, but a laugh escaped her. He turned then, surprised at the sound, and something softened in his expression, as if he hadn't heard laughter in 1,000 years. It wasn't just her who changed. Serena began to see cracks in his armor. The way his gaze lingered on the stars at night, a flicker of longing he never spoke of. The way he touched objects as though memorizing them, as though the human world might disappear if he blinked. Once she found him on the balcony, watching the city lights with an expression so lonely it ached. "You look like you missed something," she said softly. He didn't answer at first. Then, "I miss belonging somewhere." Serena's chest tightened. She understood too well. They began to share meals, not because they chose to, but because proximity demanded it. At first, silence filled the table, then sarcasm, then real conversation. She teased him for his disdain for instant ramen. He teased her for eating dessert first. Slowly, dinner became less about food and more about being.
And with each passing day, their alliance shifted. One evening, after a grueling board meeting, Serena collapsed onto the couch, heels kicked off. Aidan returned from the kitchen with tea, her favorite, though she'd never told him. "You watch everything too closely," she muttered, accepting the cup. "How else would I keep you alive?" he replied. She sipped, her eyes softening despite herself. "Maybe you're more human than you admit." The word startled him. He had spent centuries believing himself above humanity, detached from their fragile lives. But with her, he felt the opposite. He felt tethered, grounded, dangerously real. He began noticing things he hadn't in centuries. The way her eyes lit when she outsmarted a rival, the stubborn set of her jaw when she refused to yield, the rare curve of her smile when she thought no one was looking. And Serena, against every wall she had built, began to let him in. One night, as they walked home after a charity event, rain began to fall. She groaned, lifting her clutch over her head. Without a word, Aidan tilted his coat over her, shielding her from the downpour. "You'll get soaked," she protested. "I don't care." Something in his tone made her glance up. His eyes weren't mocking, weren't cold. They were steady, protective, unbearably sincere. Her chest tightened, and for once she didn't argue. The rain fell harder, soaking them both, yet in that moment, beneath his coat, she felt warmer than she had in years. But it wasn't all gentle. Their closeness brought friction, vulnerability neither knew how to handle. Serena hated needing someone. Aidan hated feeling. One night, after a particularly reckless decision on her part, publicly confronting a relative who had plotted against her, they argued so fiercely the walls seemed to tremble. "You can't keep throwing yourself into danger," Aidan roared. "And you can't keep controlling me," Serena snapped back. For a moment, silence crackled between them, heavy and raw. Then Serena's voice broke, softer. "If I don't fight, I lose everything. Don't you understand?" Aidan froze, her words cutting deeper than any blade. He saw then, not the heiress, not the mask, but the woman beneath, lonely, desperate to survive. fighting not just for power, but for herself. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I do understand, more than you know." Her breath hitched, her eyes shimmering with something she quickly blinked away. He wanted to touch her then, to bridge the impossible gap, but he stopped, his own chest burning with emotions he wasn't ready to name. Still, something had shifted. That night, Serena dreamed of stars again, and this time the figure in her dreams turned toward her. His face was Aiden's. By day they fought, by night they drew closer. Each glance lingered longer, each silence grew heavier. Their fake engagement began to blur, the lines between duty and desire thinning until neither could tell where one ended and the other began. And in those quiet, stolen moments, when Aiden's hand brushed hers at the dinner table, when Serena's laughter slipped past her defenses, they both felt it, the slow, dangerous truth. They were falling. The night was unnaturally still. Aiden sat alone in the study, candlelight flickering across his face. On the desk before him lay an ancient manuscript, its pages brittle with age, ink faded, yet legible. He had scoured the earth for texts like these, remnants of celestial lore scattered across centuries. And tonight he finally found the answer he had dreaded: the mark. The glowing sigil that now rested on Serena's skin was more than a tether. It was a vessel. When it stabilized, when the mortal body fully absorbed it, his powers would be restored. His strength, his immortality, his place among the stars, all of it would return, but not without a cost. The price of restoration was ascension. Once his powers reawakened, the heavens would reclaim him. His time on earth would end, erased as though it had never existed. And with it, his memories. Every moment, every word, every glimpse of the woman who had unraveled him piece by piece. Serena. His chest tightened painfully as he traced the lines of the manuscript. He had lived centuries unshaken, untouched by the world's fragility, but the thought of forgetting her, of standing beneath the stars with her name lost to him, was unbearable. A quiet voice interrupted his torment. "You've been in here for hours." He turned sharply. Serena stood at the doorway, draped in silk, her hair loosely tied. Candlelight painted her features in soft gold, but her eyes were sharp, curious. She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the open manuscript. "You're hiding something from me." Aiden closed the book too quickly. "It's nothing." Her brow arched. "You're a terrible liar." He looked away, forcing his expression into indifference. "You wouldn't understand." Serena crossed her arms, the mark on her skin glowing faintly, as if echoing her emotions. "Don't tell me what I would or wouldn't understand. I'm already hunted because of this. I deserve the truth." Silence stretched between them. Aiden's jaw clenched, war raging inside him. He wanted to protect her from the truth. He wanted to cling to the fragile illusion that they still had time. But Serena was unrelenting, her gaze cutting through his defenses. Finally, he exhaled. "The mark. It's changing. Once it stabilizes, my powers will return." Her eyes widened. "That's good, isn't it? You'll be strong again. You'll be able to fight them." "No," he said quietly, the word heavy as stone. "When my powers return, I'll be taken back to the heavens." The air shifted, colder, sharper. Serena's lips parted, disbelief flickering across her face. "You mean you'll leave?" I forced myself to meet her gaze, though the pain in her eyes was harder to bear than any wound. "Not just leave. Everything I've lived here, all of it will be erased. My memories, my choices, you." Her breath caught. For a moment she could only stare, her chest rising and falling as if each word was a blow. "You'll forget me?" Iman's silence was answer enough. Serena turned away, pacing, her hands trembling despite her desperate attempt to steady them. She had faced assassins, betrayals, monsters beyond comprehension, but this truth left her unmoored. "So this, everything between us, it's temporary?" The word stabbed at him, though he remained still. It was always temporary. Her head snapped back toward him, anger flashing. "Then why? Why stay? Why protect me? Why make me believe?" Her voice broke, and she bit it back, refusing to let tears fall. "Because I couldn't stop," he admitted, his voice raw, stripped of its usual composure. "Because you reminded me what it means to live, and I was selfish enough to want it, even knowing it would end." The confession hung in the air, aching and heavy. Serena's throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, strike him, demand he fight harder. But beneath her fury was fear. The fear of losing him, the fear of being forgotten, as if she had never existed in his eternity. "So I'm supposed to just wait for the day you disappear and I become another nameless mortal you leave behind?" Aiden moved closer, stopping just a breath away. His eyes burned, not with celestial fire, but something far more human. "You'll never be nameless to me, even if they take everything, even if the stars strip me bare. I swear I will fight to remember you." Her lips trembled. "And if you can't?" He reached for her hand, hesitating, as if touching her might make the vow more impossible. Finally, his fingers brushed hers, warm and trembling. "Then I will love you again. Even if I don't remember. Even if I meet you as a stranger. I will find you." The words shattered her defenses. A single tear slipped down her cheek, betraying the fortress she had built all her life. She looked at him, not as the cursed guardian, not as the protector forced into her life, but as the man who had risked everything to stand beside her. For a moment the world outside faded. No hunters, no curses, no empires. Just two souls, bound by fate and threatened by time. Serena lifted her chin, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Then until that day comes, we don't waste a second. Do you hear me? Not one." Aiden's chest ached, torn between hope and despair. He wanted to promise forever, but forever wasn't his to give. So instead he whispered, "Not one." That night, neither of them slept. Serena sat curled against the window, watching the city lights, her mind a storm of fear and longing. Aiden lingered nearby, silent, guarding her, as if his presence alone could anchor the fleeting time they had left. The truth of the curse loomed between them, a shadow neither could escape. But in that shadow, something else burned brighter than ever. Love, fragile and desperate, refusing to surrender. The empire of glass Serena had built around herself finally cracked. She had trusted him, Against her instincts, against the lessons of betrayal etched into her bones, she had let Aiden past her walls, and yet he had still hidden the truth. It happened on a night heavy with rain. She had gone searching for him in the study, only to find the manuscript left open, its ancient script glaring back at her. Words she couldn't deny. Words that spelled out the inevitable. When the mark stabilized, Aiden would leave and forget. Her blood turned to ice. The door creaked open behind her. Aiden froze, the shadow of realization falling over his face. "Serena." She whirled, her voice sharp enough to cut. "How long?" His throat tightened. "You weren't supposed to see that." "Answer me," she demanded, her hands trembling though she forced them to remain steady. "How long have you known?" He hesitated. That single pause was enough. Her chest constricted, fury colliding with the sting of betrayal. "So all this time, every word, every promise, it was a lie?" "No." He stepped closer, desperate. "I never lied about what I feel. I kept the truth because you didn't trust me," she snapped, her voice breaking. "You were just using me, my life, my body, my family's empire, everything, wasn't it? I was just a vessel for your curse." The words sliced through him, each syllable a blade. "That's not true. Serena, listen." But she pulled back, her eyes glistening with unfallen tears. "Do you have any idea what it's like to finally let someone in, only to find out they were planning to leave from the beginning?" His jaw clenched, his own voice raw. "I never planned this. You think I wanted to feel this? To need you? You've become—" He stopped himself, the words too dangerous, too final. Serena's lips trembled, but her anger hardened. "Don't you dare say it. Don't you dare make me believe it. Not when you'll forget me the moment the stars call you back." For the first time in centuries, Aiden was speechless. His strength, his certainty, the unshakable mask he wore, crumbling under her gaze. The silence between them was deafening. She turned away, each step weighted with finality. "Stay away from me, Aiden. From now on, I'll survive on my own." He reached out, almost touching her hand, but let it fall back to his side. He had no right to stop her. And so she walked away, leaving him in the shadows of the study, the manuscript lying open between them like a wound. The days that followed were colder than winter. Serena buried herself in board meetings, charity events, endless tasks that demanded her presence. She smiled in public, wielded her power like armor, but inside she was unraveling. Every corner of her home carried his imprint, his coat draped over the chair, the faint trace of his scent, the memory of his voice echoing in the halls. But she refused to yield. "I was a fool," she whispered to her reflection one night, her eyes rimmed red, though no tears fell. "I should have known better." But even as she said it, the mark on her skin pulsed faintly, betraying her. She couldn't sever the bond, no matter how desperately she tried. Meanwhile, Aiden was unraveling in silence. He kept his distance, honoring her demand, but every step away felt like betrayal of its own kind. He watched her from afar, her strength, her defiance, the walls rebuilding around her. She was slipping beyond his reach, and he had no one to blame but himself. Yet fate gave them no mercy. The cosmic hunters moved closer. Shadows crawled at the edges of the city, beings older than time itself, drawn to the unstable mark. They whispered of sacrifice, of tearing Serena apart to reclaim the power inside her. Aiden sensed them long before they struck. It was during a gala, lights dazzling, music echoing. Serena stood at the center of the room, regal in her gown, her mask perfectly faced. But Aiden saw what others did not. the shimmer in the air, the darkness slipping through the crowd. The hunters were here. He moved instantly, his body cutting through the guests, his eyes locked on Serena. But before he could reach her, the chandeliers flickered, screams erupted as shadows erupted into form. Tall, faceless figures cloaked in darkness, their voices hissing like wind. "The vessel! Give us the vessel!" Chaos consumed the hall. Serena froze for half a second, her heart pounding as the shadows closed in. Aiden's voice roared across the room, "Serena!" He leapt forward, blade of celestial light forming in his hand, striking against the nearest hunter. Sparks of starlight burst with every clash, but his strength was weaker than before, his power leaking through the bond. Serena's guards rushed to protect her, but the shadows tore through them as if they were nothing. She stumbled back, fury and terror colliding, and for one blinding instant her eyes found Aiden's. He was fighting for her. Even after everything, even when she had pushed him away, he was bleeding for her. Her chest ached, torn between anger and the undeniable truth that she still... "Serena!" His shout yanked her back. A shadow lunged toward her, its clawed hand reaching. She raised her arm instinctively, and the mark on her skin flared with light, blasting the creature back. Gasps rippled through the hall. Serena stood trembling, staring at her own hand. The hunters hissed louder. "The mark awakens." Aiden reached her side at last, his arm sweeping protectively around her. "Stay behind me." She wanted to protest, to remind him she no longer trusted him, but as the shadows pressed closer, she realized trust no longer mattered. Survival did. Their eyes met in the chaos. His, fierce and pleading, hers, torn and conflicted. And in that look lay the breaking point. Love and betrayal, trust and doubt, colliding as the world closed in. Serena's voice shook as she whispered, "Don't you dare die on me." Aiden almost smiled, blood streaking his jaw. "I wouldn't dream of it." But as the hunters surged, surrounding them in a storm of darkness, neither knew if even he could keep that promise. The battle raged like the tearing of heaven and earth. The gala hall was no more. Shattered chandeliers littered the floor. Flames licked at the broken marble, and shadows pressed in from all sides. Serena clutched her chest, the mark glowing so brightly it seared her skin. Beside her, Aiden fought with the last of his strength, his blade of starlight flickering, fading. The hunters hissed, circling. The vessel must be taken, the star must be undone. Aiden stood firm, though blood stained his lips. He had nothing left, no immortality to shield him, no boundless power, only the choice that had haunted him since the beginning. "Stay back!" he roared, his voice shaking the walls. "You will not touch her!" The hunters laughed, a sound like rusted metal grinding. "You cannot win. The curse will claim you. The girl will break beneath its weight." Serena's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Aiden, stop! You'll destroy yourself!" He turned, and in her eyes she saw everything he had never said. Love, regret, devotion. "If it means saving you, Serena, then let me burn." Her breath caught. For all the anger, the betrayal, the mistrust, she knew the truth in her bones. He meant it. He would give everything for her. The mark on her arm flared again, pain searing through her veins. She cried out, collapsing, and Aiden caught her, holding her trembling body against his chest. "Stay with me," he whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare leave me now." She gasped, her eyes brimming. "You'll forget me, won't you, the moment you go back?" "No," he said, voice breaking. "Even if the stars erase every memory, my soul will know you. Always." The hunters closed in, their claws reaching. Aiden pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle, reverent, like a prayer. Then he rose, stepping forward, and the glow of the mark beginning to transfer back into his body. "Aiden, no!" Serena cried, her voice hoarse. He smiled at her, soft, sad, infinite. "I told you once, you taught me to be human again. Now let me be more than that." And then he unleashed it. The mark ignited, blazing like a newborn sun. Light erupted from his chest, tearing through the hunters, shattering their forms into fragments of ash and dust. The entire hall filled with radiance, so bright Serena shielded her eyes, her tears falling unchecked. The shadows screamed, dissolving into nothing. The curse, the chains, the centuries of wandering burned away in one final act of defiance. When the light faded, silence fell. Serena looked around desperately. The hunters were gone. The fire had stilled. But Aiden... He stood in the center of the ruin, his body glowing faintly, as if starlight threaded through his veins. His eyes found hers, and he smiled with aching tenderness. "It's over." His voice was calm, peaceful. She shook her head violently, stumbling toward him. "No, it can't end like this. You can't leave me now, not after everything." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing her tears. "Listen to me. Our love, it was never a mistake. You made me human, Serena. You gave me back my heart." Her sob cracked the air. "Then stay with me." His glow intensified, his form beginning to blur, edges dissolving like mist. He leaned forward, pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was both promise and farewell. It burned, sweet and shattering, as if the universe itself paused to witness it. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I love you." And then the glow surged, too strong to contain. Serena clung to him, but he was already fading, his body breaking into fragments of light. "No!" she screamed, nails digging into his arms. He smiled through her tears, brushing her cheek with a dissolving hand. "Serena, you gave me eternity in a moment. That's enough." Her sobs shook the air. "It's not enough for me." But the heavens would not be denied. His form dissolved completely, scattering into 1,000 points of light. The last thing she heard was his whisper, "I'll always be watching." The hall fell silent. Serena dropped to her knees, cradling empty air, her sobs echoing in the ruin. That night the sky was brighter than ever, and though Aiden was gone, a single star pulsed more brightly than the rest, a star that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Every night she would look up, hand pressed to her heart, and whisper, "I love you too." And the star would shimmer as though answering back.